evening and welcome. Before we start the events this evening, I would like to request that we take a moment of silence to honor all the victims of the shooting in Pittsburgh, and also honor all those people and in support of the people who get targeted for who they are, how they look, who they love, or how they pray. So please take a moment of silence. Thank you. Once again, good evening and welcome. Pluralism is neither a faith nor a religion. It has no scripture or prophet, no idols or temples. Rather, it is a mindset that recognizes and celebrates diversity. It is common sense that people coming from diverse backgrounds, life experiences, histories, and cultures will have different beliefs, ideologies, and practices. These are the words that I have borrowed from Dr. Javed Akhtar. And with these words, I would like to let you know that among us today, we have the great honor and privilege of having thinkers and movers of our society, like the Honorable Salman Khurshid, the Honorable Sam Petroda, and our very own Dr. Javed Akhtar. And today, the topic of discussion will be pluralism and liberal democracy in peril in the US and in India, and the way to resist and recoup. Dr. Javed Akhtar needs no introduction. For most people in this audience know him as a pediatric pulmonologist, but he's also a writer, a published author, an activist, and is the founding member and on the board of several local and international not-for-profits that are doing humanitarian work all over the globe. His most recent book, Prophetic, is sold in several bookstores and on Amazon. The eminent Islamic scholar Dr. Tasneema Ghazi of Iqra notes that Dr. Akhtar has a rare gift of communicating scholarship in writing that is lively, pleasing, and accessible. With that, I'd like to invite Dr. Akhtar to the podium.
Thank you, Zainab. Thank you very much. That was very kind of you. I think even this day. Let me start out with an anecdote. I was at a dinner a little while ago. Actually, it was in his house, and there was a group of people, and I was chatting, and I heard someone say, I heard this phrase, it is a complete way of life. So, as you know, when you are around Muslims, they are fond of saying that Islam is a complete way of life. So, that's what I assumed. But as I turned the corner, actually, there was a Hindu gentleman there, a friend of Dr. Imtiaz, who was explaining to somebody else, you know, it's hard to say what Hinduism is, but it is a complete way of life. I thought that was very interesting. Very, very interesting indeed. So whatever faith or tradition we believe in, we feel that is the complete way of life. And I think that is actually the point where I want to start out and talk about pluralism a little bit. Now, we live in a multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multi-religious world. And we have to come to terms with it. There is no other way.
The blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is when you are with Muslims. And alhamdulillah, in this school, there are over students. Your child is there for 5 hours with fellow Muslims. They participate and they live Islam. And you have neighbors, Muslims. And if they have children, please encourage them to send them to either the full-time school or the Sunday school. Alhamdulillah. Inshallah, let's all pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us and our children to the straight path and keep us on it. Jazakallah khair. Ameen.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Brother Nazir. We appreciate all.
World is to get to know each other and to recognize each other, and it would be civility and would decline, and we would be in a much worse place. So we, I think, can achieve it through pluralism. Now, pluralism to me is a mindset. It's a temperament. It is a softness of heart. It is a culture of respect. It's a culture of respect. It is not pantheism. It is not relativism. And it's not even secularism. Because secularism can take many different forms. For example, if you are a secular state, as in France or Switzerland, then you don't want religion to be visible. Religion has to be entirely in your private domain, and it should not be visible. So, if you are a Swiss, officially, they don't want to see any minarets. I don't know why, how would that interfere with their banking, or they're making watches, but they don't want to see any minarets at all. And of course, in France, they will stand the hijab and the kippah and the cross that is visible. It is not mere tolerance. Sometimes people say, well, it's tolerant. It's not. Tolerance actually has a negative implication to it. It simply says, well, you are not that good, but I am good, and I will tolerate you. That is not tolerance. It is beyond that. It is a concept that arises from this phrase, e pluribus unum. If you know, that is in the US flag, from out of many one. Now, ordinary folks, simple folks, now I'm not talking about politicians, and I'm not talking about any politicians in the room at all. So ordinary folks, both in India and the US and many other countries, have this mindset, getting along with each other, being friends with each other, regardless of what their faith or tradition might be. Now, these traditions actually go a long ways. In the United States, let me just take a minute and point out something I read that is very interesting. It goes back to the very formation of this nation. And there are a couple of books I would recommend you read. One is the book called Jefferson's Quran, that really has nothing to do with the Quran itself, but how Jefferson at his time struggled at the formation of this country to be very inclusive. So in 2 sentences, what it talks about is, even if there was a Muslim in this country, he would still be able to become the president of the country. Now, use that as an example. Okay, thank you. I'm not running. So he used that as an example. There were no Muslims in the United States then, but Muslims were considered the most maligned people. Actually, there was a concept of Antichrist, and the Protestants, which were the majority in the country, then they said, well, the Pope and the Turk, the Muslims were called Turks, the Pope and the Turk together form the Antichrist. One is the body of the Antichrist, the other is the spirit of the Antichrist. They had it all sorted out quite nicely. But anyway, the book I wanted to talk about, and quote, many may not be familiar with it, it's called The Letters from an American Farmer from 18th century. It was published by, it is part of a book by Hector St. John Crevecoeur. And what he did was he went over, he saw this farmer and met him, and this was a very eloquent man, but he was not writing, so he encouraged him to write letters to him, and got those letters together and published them in a book. And now this is what that farmer said. He said that, this is again, late 18th century. So he's describing this phenomenon of nascent pluralism, and in the letter, of course, he calls it hybridization. Now, when you say hybrid today, we would say Prius, but what he actually meant by hybridization was pluralism. He said, the farmer writes, the foolish vanity, or rather the fury of making proselytes, is unknown here. They have no time. The seasons call for all their attention, and thus in a few years, this mixed neighborhood will exhibit a strange religious medley that will be neither pure Catholicism nor pure Calvinism. And he continued, here individuals of all nations have melted into a new race of men. So that's where it started, and that has become part of the DNA of the Americans that I meet. Now, when what I mentioned in one of the recent op-eds I wrote was, when I meet the younger folks, younger people who have grown up here, without fail, they're all very tolerant, they are very pluralistic, they're very open-minded. And that's where my hope is in this country. When I look at what's going on here with all the bigotry and the racism, it gets very discouraging. Without fail, they all have this wonderful attitude of inclusiveness and being open-minded. So now it would, of course, would be Pollyannish to not recognize that there is a coarsening of this age-old discourse of being inclusive, both in the U.S. and India. In India, of course, the right-wing politics of Hindu nationalism, I use that word with caution, and white nationalism in the U.S. I mean, if you were to say what is a white nationalist look like, what a white nationalist government would look like, you just have to look at Trump's administration. It is full of folks who would be called white nationalists. And they have degraded and dragged us all down into the mud. Now, this is having a direct impact on liberal democracy. Just look at how the politicians have behaved recently. Look at the ads. It is, gloves are off and people are falling into the names, and it's really sometimes it is funny to watch people how they get to each other and then sit down at the same table and talk, but it is very discouraging. And it has turned the election to a kind of a wrestling mania. Now, bipartisanship would not be meaningful without recognizing some good in the other, without recognizing the other person may have a valid point of view, and it may be very different from yours, but you need to be able to recognize it. That is inherent in it. So the part of fighting stereotyping and being pluralistic is also recognizing the bias within ourselves. We all have an implicit bias within ourselves. So that's very important to recognize as well. You can't find racism if you are racist yourself. Now, there is a very interesting project that started a few years ago. It's called Project Implicit. Project Implicit by one of these scholars there at Harvard, and it's on the website. I encourage you to go visit it. You can say Project Implicit in Harvard, and it has these things, and you have to answer some questions. You will get a feedback, and it has questions like India, Pakistan. It has questions like white, black, a number of other areas. And sometimes you'd be surprised that you have the subconscious inherent racism within ourselves, and we need to recognize that, and we need to fight that. Now, I come to the idea of pluralism, I believe in it strongly, from my own tradition, Islam, and I'm familiar with. So I'll quote you one verse in a second, and I'm absolutely certain that this will find a resonance in traditions as well. And I'm not qualified to speak about other faiths, but I'll speak about mine. And I'll just quote you one verse of the Quran, which goes this way: "O humanity." So there are some verses of the Quran that address all believers, and they're really addressing Muslims, but others address all of humanity. So this one starts out by saying, "O humanity, God has created you male and female." Basically, the translation is Homo sapiens. We are all one together. This is the difference. Homo sapiens. Then the ayah says, and the verse says, "And made you into diverse nations and tribes." The saying with the Latin, Homo diversitas. We are all Homo sapiens, but there are differences between you. Homo diversitas. And it says, so that you may come to know each other. Come to and knowing each other. You have to know each other. Not sit down and at the same table and say, hi, what's your name? But really get to know each other. So that you can benefit from it. Your diversity is something to celebrate, and that gives you strength. So again, to translate that, the message I hear is, be homo amicus and not homo hostilis. Be homo amicus and not homo hostilis. So that you may get to know each other. Verily, the most honored among you is the one who does this. The most righteous who does the best work. Very simple, very straightforward. And that to me is inspiring. That's what leads me into this work I've been doing for a while about promoting pluralism. So, pluralism, as I understand it, to repeat myself, is essential for civil society. It is the cornerstone of a healthy liberal democracy, which in turn will lead nations into peace and prosperity. And that is the future we all want for our progeny, for our children. So we are resuscitating a think tank started some years ago, ran well for a few years, and then we stopped for multiple reasons. It's called ISP. And those of you who buy into this concept, please indicate you're interested in it. We want a very large and diverse group to be part of it. We want a space where people of goodwill of all faiths and traditions would come together on common initiatives that focus on fighting stereotyping, racism, and promote socio-economic justice, and above all, create a culture of respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Javed Bhai. Before you go, I actually would like you, as well as our honorable speakers, Mr. Sam Khurshid and Mr. Salman Khurshid, to please come onto the podium. I think we'll continue with the talk,
sure, and
then dinner will be later. So if you could please welcome our honorable speakers, Mr. Salman Khurshid, Mr. Sam Khurshid. Also, while the speakers take their seat, I would like to tell you that there should be cards and pens on your tables. If you have any questions for this panel, do write them down. Towards the end of the talk, someone will come around and collect your questions, and hopefully our speakers will be able to address them. This evening, we will not be taking any verbal questions, so do write down what you have to say, and we will come and collect them. So, with that, I would.
There's gentleman also here. He's so
should I invite him?
Please invite him up.
Okay. Also, I'd like to invite Dr. Faizan Mustafa, Professor. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. We have a check. Yeah, excellent. Thank you again, Dr. Mustafa, and I apologize for my massacring the name. It's Nalsar University. Again, please welcome Dr. Faizan Mustafa. Thank you. Build a good self with focus on family, friends, discipline, ethics, morals, honesty, character. Develop respect for others, openness, truth, and trust, and service for fellow human beings. These are the words of our next speaker, Mr. Sam Khurshid. Mr. Sam Khurshid is an internationally respected telecom inventor, entrepreneur, thinker, policymaker who has spent more than 50 years in information and communication technology. He's also held several high-level government positions like cabinet minister and advisor to the Prime Minister of India, and is a founding member of several non-for-profit organizations. Mr. Khurshid now calls Chicago his home. However, when I was growing up back in India, if you heard the name Sam Khurshid, there were two things that came to mind. He was commonly known as Mr. India, also known as the Indian Kenny Rogers. So with that, I'd like to welcome Mr. Sam Khurshid.
Thank you. my friend Salman Khurshid, Dr. Javed Akhtar, Dr. Faisal Mustafa, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Special privilege for me to be with you. I'm not an expert on religion, nor I understand enough about pluralism to really make some remarkable, interesting comments. I see world through connectivity, and I'll tell you my view on connectivity and pluralism. Before I do that, since I have you all here, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Indian Overseas Congress. Since my colleague from Congress is here, I want to take this opportunity to also brief him. We have in 18 countries Indian Overseas Congress with large number of people who either believe in Congress, want to work for Congress, come from Congress families, and genuinely believe in the idea of India that our founding fathers talked about. I can tell you about my own experience. I was born in 1942 in a small little tribal village in India, in Orissa, and we were 8 brothers and sisters. Right in front of my house, there was a Muslim family. They also had 8 brothers and sisters. On the left side was Sardar, Punjabi. They had 3 or 4 kids. Next to them was a Marwari, and in the back of us was tribal Oriya family. All of us grew up together. No one ever thought that this was Muslim, this was Sardar, this was Marwadi. We were Gujaratis, settled in Orissa. Everyone played together. Everyone ate everybody's food, though there were people who were vegetarian. The whole idea of the fact that you are different was unthinkable in those days. Sardar was an uncle and he took care of all the kids. He would play with us gilli danda. It is that kind of an ecosystem that we came out of during independence movement. Gandhi was our role model. We grew up thinking of Gandhian values as the core values which always talked about democracy, freedom, inclusion, diversity, non-violence. And these were not just words. These were concepts that we took for granted. In college also, we hardly had an opportunity to ask somebody, what is your religion? Never asked. If Abdul was a friend, Abdul was a friend. Nobody ever even asked him, are you Muslim? And there are lots of Gujarati Muslims who went to college with me. It is recently that I see this whole idea of who you are. Why are you so different? Thanks, Rakesh. And why you should be different than I am. So to me, pluralism is the real pillar of a modern society. You have to take it for granted. This is something you don't discuss. This is something I accept. And I have no conversation on it. If you want to talk about it, I have no interest in it. That's how I grew up. Today, we have serious challenges in this country as well as in India. People are divided. Dr. Javed Akhtar talked about it briefly. And to me, all of these things have to do with connectivity. Let me tell you my view. For the first time in the human history, we are all connected. Never happened before. Just in last 5 years, all 8 billion people are connected. This connectivity is very different from the connectivity of the past. Connectivity of the past was for conversation. This new connectivity is for productivity, efficiency, opportunities, innovations, transformation. And as a result, everything we do today is basically obsolete. Nothing that I know of today that we do makes sense based on the connectivity opportunities. How we educate our people is obsolete. There is no need to go to school. There is no need to have teacher, according to me. How do we provide health services is obsolete. How do we govern is obsolete. Look at commerce. We used to go buy things by physically going visiting. How do we do that today? What happened with electronic commerce? What is happening to financial services? Everything we do today is being transformed in a very subtle way. And we are not paying much attention to it, even though our world is changing right in front of our own eyes. In that kind of an environment, I find that many people are uncomfortable. They want to latch on to what they had. So their idea of latching on to what we have is go back either to religion or to culture, blame immigrants for something, blame people who practice religion differently for something, and there is knee-jerk reaction in the society, everywhere. As opposed to understanding globalization, privatization, liberalization, free market economy, with connectivity as the core value, people are reacting and they want to go back. Saying, if I can differentiate from you based on my whatever values, I would preserve my territory. That knee-jerk reaction, I believe, started from India. So the real Trump phenomena originated in India. Then it sort of multiplied, settled here. See what's going on in Brazil. Last election in Brazil, just a few days ago, is an example of that reaction. Rather than saying now we are connected, we got to broaden up our horizon. We got to focus on openness, connectivity, networking, democratization, decentralization. That's going to be the way of life. And more immigrants will move everywhere. Because at the end of the day, everybody is immigrant. No matter where you are immigrant. My father went to Orissa in 1930. He was an immigrant as a Gujarati. Lots of Gujaratis went to Africa 150 years ago. They were all immigrants. I came here 55 years ago. I'm an immigrant. So this whole idea saying you are different doesn't work in connected world. Because in connected world, your physical presence don't mean anything. You could be here and working somewhere else and getting your salary from some third country. All of these ideas of connectivity are changing our concept of who we are, how we interact, how we relate to families, what community we belong to. And when I look at all of these things, I am convinced that the world needs to be redesigned. World was last designed after World War II by Americans, which said United Nations, World Bank, IMF, NATO, WTO, GDP, GNP, per capita income, balance of payment, trade deficit. That is the design based on democracy, human rights, capitalism, consumption, and war. That design don't make sense anymore. You cannot judge anybody or any country based on GDP, GNP anymore. It doesn't work. We don't have a new design. Today, world is following the design that is 75 years old. And all the tension that I see in the world today has to do with the fact that that design doesn't work. So when someone says my GDP is growing at 4%, don't mean a thing. Doesn't mean anything. But we don't know what else to do. We have no other measurements. All of the things that we are discussing related to religion, terror, all that has a lot to do with the fact that we need new design. Look at the design that was conceived in 44. Right after that, Gandhi-led independence movement decolonized the entire world. In 20 years, the entire world was decolonized. The old design did not figure that in. Then comes Deng Xiaoping. He says, I'm going to prove Americans wrong by combining capitalism with communism. He succeeds. Then comes Gorbachev. He says, I'm going to do exactly opposite. I'm going to keep the economic system same, but I'm going to change the political system. He fails. Berlin Wall falls. Soviet Union disintegrates. And then there is one power called US as the only global power. And everyone thought world will now follow the old design. And then comes 9/11. And 9/11, according to me, changes everything. 9/11 to me was a response to a unipolar world. I'm not a political scientist. I'm not an economist. But I sincerely believe if there was a Soviet Union, you will not have 9/11. It is in this light we need to think through what religion means today. To me, religion is a very personal thing. I'm a Hindu who doesn't believe in religion. My wife is a Hindu who prays 2 hours a day. Perfectly okay. I have no conflict. I respect that. I never discuss, never argue, never complain. If she forces me to do something, I do it just to make her happy. I don't believe in it. She knows that. Okay. I never enter temple. And I'm a Hindu. But I have never entered temple in my life. What does religion mean? To me, religion is a very personal thing. In the same family, you could have 5 different versions of how you practice your religion. By institutionalizing religion, we have complicated religion, according to me. These are the questions we need to ask in the 21st century. We cannot go back to the old formula. If religion is not going to change in 21st century, we'll have a serious problem. If everything is changing, religion also must change. If commerce is changing, finance is changing, business is changing, governance is changing, why wouldn't religion change? Why should we get stuck with something that was said by somebody 5,000 years ago? I'm questioning that. Not that you have to agree with me. But if each one of us don't think through this properly, we will have the same conflict that we have had for generations. Religion is definitely a conflict zone. Mainly because it becomes a public space. If it is a private space, it's a peace zone. I have no conflict at home because religion is a private space in my own house. I used to say that I have outsourced religion to my wife and my mother. And they do such a great job, I don't want to complicate life. Yeah. But that doesn't mean I'm less of a Hindu. That's the point. How do we take religion in a very different way in a connected world is going to be the challenge for the next 50 years. If we don't understand the meaning of connectivity and religion, Because everything else is changing, religion also must change. At the end of the day, two things matter in life to me. One, people, and two, planet. There is no third thing. What matters is human beings. We are all connected, interconnected in many different ways. If we don't really respect people and our planet, there is no place to go. Everything else comes later. So when I look at Gandhi, I think of people in terms of truth, trust, love, courage, simplicity. To me, these five things define people, my approach to people. You could add five of yours, you can add three of yours, doesn't matter. But this is the core of how I treat with people, how I deal with people. Planet, environment, human needs and not human wants. Conservation. So there are little five other things that define how I would deal with environment. And my platform has to be based on democracy, freedom, inclusion, diversity, and non-violence. Irrespective of what religion you practice. If you believe in these things, religion don't matter. You could be Muslim, I could be Hindu, somebody else could be Christian, somebody else could be Jews, don't matter. The problem begins when we begin to force our ideas on the others. And pluralism is all about respecting, like Dr. Jayed Akhtar said, other point of view, having a broader conversation, letting them do what they wish to do as long as they don't hurt people, as long as they don't hurt planet. Perfectly all right. So I would request all of us to really start thinking in a different domain. And the new domain is domain of connectivity. Remember, first time in the history, we are all connected. Never happened before, and we haven't even celebrated that. No one talks about the fact the world is all connected. It happened in the last 5 years. What does it mean to have a connected world? Is the question we have to ask. And that's where pluralism plays an important role. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Patoda, and thank you especially for putting the focus and light on connectivity and what connectivity means in our world today. If you ask my teenage daughters, they will tell you connectivity means Snapchat and Facebook. If you ask my mother, it means exchange of prayers and exchange of recipes. And if you ask my husband, it means when is dinner ready, a text asking that. So I guess connectivity means a lot of different things to all of us. But again, thank you for highlighting what it means to us as a world. With that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, our Honorable Salman Khurshid. Mr. Khurshid is a Renaissance figure. He is a designated senior advocate for the Supreme Court of India, an author, an educationist and social reformer. He is also a major presence in the Indian political scene. Mr. Khurshid has taken on many controversial issues with courage and brought clarity to them, including the most recent Triple Talaq issue. Books he has written include At Home in India, If Winter Comes, and Beyond Terrorism. He has also written the highly acclaimed play, Sons of Babur, Babur Ki Aulad. But before I call him to speak on the current topic, which is the political and social climate in India and its parallels in the United States, I'd like to also let you know that Mr. Khurshid will be providing a response to the Al-Ghazali lecture series at Elmhurst College on November 5th, Monday, November 5th. The topic of the lecture is Divine Commandments, human input, Sharia as sacred law in action. And Mr. Salman Khurshid will provide the response. With that, I'd like to invite Mr. Khurshid to the podium.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted and indeed deeply impressed with the quality and caliber of the audience. It's not every day that one encounters such distinguished people in such large numbers, and that too over a weekend. And I'm certainly both impressed and flattered. I'm grateful particularly, and I feel honored that we have, and I have the company of such remarkable people. We have Mr. Sam Petroda, who I believe could change. Should I, please? Or just hold it? Yeah, okay. Mr. Sam Petroda, who I believe is given to several generations of our country a special thing called hope and aspiration, a special thing about feeling that you can change the world. And he indeed, in a remarkable way, has changed our lives in India. And to acknowledge that with gratitude is something that, and to do that too in his hometown is a great privilege. We have Dr. Faizan Mustafa, who's one of our leading scholars of law. And we've had series of great legal thinkers in our country. But I believe in the next decades to come, there will be need for deep thinking about how India's law is growing and developing, supervised and pronounced by the Indian Supreme Court, and you will see this name again and again as that's discussed. And of course, delighted absolutely that Dr. Javed Akhtar, who introduced himself to me this morning by saying, not the husband of Shabana Azmi. And so that's an introduction that will stick for a long time. But what will also stick in my mind is his remarkable scholarly approach to subjects that we take so much for granted. I heard him this afternoon, and I've heard him again this evening, and I do believe that his remarkable books that he's already written are but precursors of a greater book that is waiting to come. And I certainly think for somebody who can look after body and soul together, body by being a medical doctor and soul by being a scholar of such intuitive caliber on subjects such are so intrinsic to our lives is something of a great privilege to come across. So thank you very much, all of you, for giving me this opportunity. When I come abroad and I speak on what is happening at home, there are people who wait like hounds to get me when I get back, because I can either tell you the truth or I can do what some eminent people we know in your country and mine who don't tell the truth. And I would get away safely by not telling the truth, but I would certainly face a very severe fire for telling the truth. But then the important thing this evening for me is that Dr. Javed Akhtar said truth and nothing but the truth. And I can't possibly accept his hospitality and go away without telling you the truth. Although I was sorely tempted to fall back on my little knowledge of Mullah Nasruddin. Mullah Nasruddin once had to speak to a distinguished audience like yours, and he wasn't really quite prepared. So he looked at everyone and said, ladies and gentlemen, do you know what I'm going to say? And everyone said, no, we have no idea. We don't know what you're going to say. And he said, my principle is not to speak to people who don't know what I'm going to say, and I'm leaving. And he went away. He went away, and everybody said, this won't do. Bring him back. Next week, bring him back. And we'll take care of him. He'll have to say something. So he came again and said, so ladies and gentlemen, now you know what I'm going to say. And everybody said, of course we do. He said, good, then I needn't say it at all. And so he went. So someone like Dr. Javed Akhtar said, get this man back, we know what to do with him. Half of us will say we know, the other half will say we don't, so there will be no escape. And that's what happened. He was called again. And he said, do you know what I'm going to say? And half said cheerfully, of course we do. The other half said, with a straight face, no, we don't. So he paused, smiled and said, good, then those who know will please tell those who don't, my job is done, I'm going. Now, I was sorely tempted to put an end to my intervention this evening at that point, saying, I'm sure at least half of you know what is to be said, and please say it to the other half. But I would leave a very, very bad legacy in Chicago. And there would be a lot of explaining to do, so I will attempt to say a few things. Essentially, I think speaking about what is happening in your country, it would be a little audacious and a little presumptuous. You see it at close quarters, and you know what it is doing to this fantastic and wonderful society that we have all admired greatly. That certainly for me, in my subject of jurisprudence, of law, I have had the greatest experience at the foot of great stalwarts of jurisprudence from your country. People like Professor Ronald Dworkin, who we lost 2 years ago, Professor John Rawls, Amartya Sen, who is really a part of your existence, i.e. an NRI, somebody having travelled long distances from India and established both a name and residence, as it were, in this vast continent of America. People of that caliber are the ones who instilled in me the idea of democracy, the idea of equality, the idea of dignity of human beings, the idea of what an individual means to society, and so on. And so when I see that society crumble or at least appear to crumble under the pressure of the kind of very, very, very strange thinking of the establishment of the day, I wonder and I worry. And I worry. We have great hopes in the United States of America. And what would lesser countries do in terms of countries who still need to achieve, in terms of intellectual accomplishments of our times, in terms of what is happening in the universities where research and the cutting edge of intellect is being experienced. The mic seems to not like my criticism of what is happening in the United States of America. But I'm quite sure that we will, in the spirit of defiance, overcome. But as I said, I'm a bit reluctant to speak more about the United States of America because I think you know so much, except to flag my distress, my concern, and certainly my hope. Thank you. And certainly my hope that we will see the United States of America come out without a major loss of what it means to the world.
1, 2, 1, 2.
But let's talk about India. I hope you can all hear me. Let's talk about India. Is there something I'm doing wrong, or is it?
There is some interference from somewhere.
Yeah. It's fine now, I think. Yeah. Well, let's talk about India, which has experienced a traumatic transformation, and I hope it's a temporary transformation since 2014. It was, as Mr. Sam Patora pointed out, it was something that was building up, and we saw it coming. But perhaps we were ill-equipped or ill-prepared to handle it, or to face it with the vigor and determination that we could have. And as a result, we see what has happened in India. The question is this something that is of a permanent nature, or is it something that is transitional and transitory? Many of our institutions will be put to test, and are indeed being put to test. And those institutions are institutions that we have cherished and we have applauded, and institutions that we have respected, institutions that we have turned to in hours of crisis. And all those institutions are under stress, including the courts of the land, institutions in terms of universities, institutions like very frightening terms when they draw parallels from the pre-war Germany, when they draw parallels to what happens when democracy gets derailed, and they draw parallels from the inhumanity that can be inflicted by man upon man, by humans upon humans. And so, while it's a frightening perspective of what is happening today, we do believe, and if you look around carefully, there are some extremely wonderful things happening as well. There is a remarkable growth story that we unleashed some years ago. The great transformation happened when India switched from what was largely a state economy and a mixed economy with a larger dominant role of the state to an open economy, more of a market economy, but a market economy with regulations that were rational and reasonable, but allowed the total genius of the Indian people to express themselves in the marketplace, in the universities, in the public spaces of our country. That is continuing because there is a fantastic genius of the Indian people. And there, of course, there is a remarkable contribution of everyone, including the Muslims of India. That's a remarkable contribution that cannot be overlooked and that cannot be ignored and that cannot be denied. That is happening, and I do believe that it's reflected here as well in the presence of great personalities like Dr. Faizan Mustafa. But while this is happening, if you look at the sports fields of our country, if you look at the cricket team, for instance, you look at the hockey team, if you look at the cinema world, and you look at Bollywood.
We'll switch the mic if you don't mind. Thank you.
Yeah. And if you look at Bollywood, nobody would say that we are faltering. Nobody would say that our steps are beginning to stumble. We can relish, we can applaud, and we can enjoy the remarkable story of growth, achievement, and accomplishment that we see all around in many fields. We see the field of art and culture, in the field of science, in the field of education, in the field of military, in the field of medical science. We are doing some remarkable things. But what is essential to hold a society together is beginning to get frayed. And that is the question today. And the question essentially is on our understanding what society is all about. There is an essential difference in the present establishment in India and their understanding of what is society, and the understanding that those of us who were in government or who've been in the establishment before had understood society to be. And that understanding of society is, in a sense, in the common space is explained as our idea of India. What was the idea of India that we inherited from the likes of Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru? And what is the idea of India that is being projected today? That is being projected today perhaps with greater vigor than we ever celebrated our idea of India. And that is the essential question. People are now turning around to say that you must become invisible. Who must become invisible? The Indian minorities must become invisible. This is a demand that is being made of our people. I'll hold two or one. Thank you. That's a demand that's being made of people. And people are saying strategically, tactically, please begin to behave like other people. Don't look any different. Some people suggest that you can change your names. Why must you have names that identify you as Christians and Muslims and Sikhs? Why don't you change your names and be like everybody else? Why don't you dress like everybody else? Why don't you eat the food that everybody else eats? Why don't you speak the language that everybody else speaks? But the answer to that we give is that then we would no longer be Indians. Then we would be like machines. Then India would not be the India of our dreams, that India would not be the India that we have lived for and died for. And when I ask people who propose such ideas, and I say to them, would you want Havildar Abdul Hamid to change his name as well? Would you want Brigadier Usman, who was the first great martyr in the war against Pakistan, would you want him to change his name as well? Would you want all remarkable Indians who have Muslim names to change as well? And if you do, you would make India that much poorer. Today, the richness of India is expressed in the remarkable names of remarkable people from all remarkable religions. And that's not Muslims alone. It's another matter that Muslims happen to be 14% or 15% of India's population, and therefore may appear to somebody to be a possible impediment in their vision of turning India into a country very different from what it is today. Something that is not the resistance that is not offered by Christians, perhaps according to them. And it may be true, because I do know that many Christians have opted to change their names and taken names that do not put them apart from ordinary Indians. Ordinary Indians. This is interference that you should ignore, either of thank you or hello. So the fact remains that we have a choice to make. Every society, if we define a society to be such, every society must have adequate commonalities to call itself a society. And in every society that have adequate commonalities also has commonalities that make it a nation. But critically, and I think you should know this, critically, not every nationality is equal to citizenship. India is unusual in that in India, nationality and citizenship are common. If you go to Central Asia, you could have German nationality and Uzbek citizenship. You could be a Turk national and yet be an Uzbek citizen or a Kazakh citizen, etc. India has combined nationality and citizenship for purposes of its law, but India cannot combine nationality and citizenship for purposes of understanding what India is, because nationality, which often in Urdu is described as qaum, is not necessarily citizenship. And therefore, the question used to arise in the past, quite often, I suppose never satisfactorily answered, is it right to call Indian Muslims, or should they really be called Muslim Indians? Now you call yourself here, American Muslims, or Muslim Americans. It doesn't make a difference to you. But people in India thought it made a difference. Frankly, Muslims never felt that it made a difference, because for them, India was home, India was the Awosh in which they were born, and India is what their ancestors chose as their home. There were people who left India and there were people who didn't leave India. And we are the fortunate ones whose ancestors and predecessors said, this is our home, and this is where we'll be, and this is where we will live. And so I often tell our detractors that when a Muslim soldier in India writes in his blood, writes the term Jai Hind or Vande Mataram on the cold snow of the Himalayas, do you then call him truly a patriot or not? And if you call him a patriot, then how can you say that Muslims, by calling themselves Muslims, are not to be patriots? But this is a war that has to be fought. And what we need to do in India, and I hope that you and your families back home will understand this, this is not the war of Muslims alone. This is the war of all Indians to fight. And strategically, and this is something that you will probably want to ask us, and we must be able to answer, and certainly when our manifesto for the next coming elections is prepared, you will want to ask us as to what is our position and how will we ensure equal respect and dignity to all people, including Muslims of India. My answer is that we have any number of secular, liberal, committed people and leaders in our country who are not Muslims by faith, who are Indians of other faiths, whether it's faith Hinduism or it's the faith of Christianity or the faith of Sikhism, who are prepared to speak for you. And the mistake that we made in the past, the mistake that helped us, that pushed us into the trap that was laid for us, was that Muslims spoke only for Muslims. And Muslims expected Muslims to speak only for themselves. Why must we speak only when one of us is hurt? Why must we not speak when anyone is hurt? Why should we always run to a Muslim leader and say, why have you not said anything thus far? Why don't we go to every single leader and say, why have you not spoken for us thus far? Muslims, after independence, saw in safety and assurance in Mahatma Gandhi. They saw a leader for themselves in Jawaharlal Nehru, in Indira Gandhi, and in Rajiv Gandhi. They never said we want a Muslim leader exclusively. And it was the generosity of other leaders of our country, including Jawaharlal Nehru, who ensured that the Muslim leaders were secure, that Muslim leaders prospered. What Jawaharlal Nehru did for Maulana Azad perhaps is unparalleled in the history of political friendships. When Maulana Azad had to face the backlog of emotions caused by partition, when Maulana Azad was put up against the wave of Muhammad Ali Jinnah. But isn't it important and critical that Maulana Azad stood his ground, and everybody who stayed with Maulana Azad had the support of people like Jawaharlal Nehru, and we survived. But we survived, and we flourished, and we grew, but there were problems in our country because of which we kept ourselves carefully aloof. We said, let the Dalits of the country move forward first, because they are the ones who have been humiliated and they are the ones who have been exploited. And today we know that because of the measures taken by our founding fathers, the Dalits stand in a much better position, not only in terms of economic welfare, but also in terms of political assertion that today they can make apparent anywhere in the political system. But realizing that Muslims had fallen back, perhaps because of not demanding, perhaps because of self-consciousness of partition, perhaps because they were to be patient and wait, we introduced the Satchar Committee report. The Satchar Committee report is the first report in the history of Indian politics to refer to Muslims not as minorities, but as Muslims. And the Satchar Committee report was the most far-reaching promise of giving dignity and equality to Muslims. Sadly, we didn't get the time to be able to implement many of the outstanding policies of Satchar Committee. But strategically, now we have to be careful about how we implement it. because everything we do for any minority group in our country is taken as a challenge by the establishment, and establishment then uses it against the interest of the minorities themselves. So what we need to do is devise methodology by which we would be able to provide to all the minorities without identifying them independently. And there, the Equal Opportunity Commission that was suggested by such a committee is the most wonderful instrument where you don't make people stand segregated separately. There, any community, irrespective of whether it's a majority or minority, any community that has found historical discrimination would be addressed not by force, not by reservations, which have their own negative fallout, but by incentivizing and disincentivizing. And I believe that the future of affirmative action in India lies in the Sachar Committee proposal of a commission that would be a high-powered commission for equal opportunities for all citizens. What has happened is the paradigm of the majority versus minority has given a stick to the establishment to beat us with. Instead, what we need to do is the majority must stand for the minority, and the minority and majority must stand together. And therefore, when you give benefits to Muslims or Christians or Sikhs or Dalits, you also give benefits to those members of the upper caste that are equally discriminated and disadvantaged. You don't leave them out and give an indication that somehow, because the votes are with the minorities, they don't deserve our attention. It's not a matter of votes alone. It's a matter of the future of our children. And therefore, such instruments will have to be introduced, which instruments, I believe, will bring us together rather than divide us between different groups and different identities. But there is something to be said for that element of identity that gives you a special standing in society, whether it's cultural, or it's historical, or it is religious, or it's linguistic, which our Constitution recognizes, our Constitution protects. We have to strategize to ensure that that is adequately implemented in the years to come. I believe my party, the Congress Party, and we are deeply grateful for the restructuring of our programs that Mr. San Patroda has been deeply involved in. That restructuring of our programs for social welfare and bringing about greater harmony in Indian society will be laid bare when our manifesto comes out. And I hope that there will be one meeting of the manifesto group to come here and explain to you that we are looking at a brighter future for India, a brighter future for your children, a brighter future for those of you who want to come back to India one day. And you will, of course, be welcome. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Khurshid, for recapping Indian history and also painting a very clear picture about identity and how we can use identity in making the fabric of a nation stronger rather than using identity as a divisive tool. What is very true in nations like India is also very true in pluralistic nations like the United States. So I hope all of us, whether of Indian origin or not, see the value of using identity as a bridge, just as Mr. Khurshid just highlighted. With that, I'd also like to introduce to you a very prominent guest who we have the honor of being present with us today. This is Mr. Faizan Mustafa, the Vice Chancellor of the National Academy of Legal Studies and Research University, also known as NALSA, from Hyderabad. And before taking charge as Vice Chancellor of NALSA, he was the founder and Vice Chancellor of the National Law University in Odisha. Besides teaching and research work in the fields of law, he has also authored several books and plenty of papers in national and international journals. He has been credited. Dr. Mustafa to the podium.
Mr. Sam Petroda, Salman Sahab, Javed Akhtar Sahab, ladies and gentlemen, I came here to hear Sam Petroda and Salman Sahab. And Chicago is testing my speaking abilities by, asking me at the last moment to speak. But a few reflections after hearing two very eminent speakers. And speaking after such eminent speakers is no joke. I went to Aligarh. Doesn't have ragging. Even during my days, ragging was not something prohibited on campuses. Subsequently, we got a law.
Thank you.
So it was called introduction. And in my see US and India, in one line I can say there is a difference. Melting pot theory. In melting pot theory, all the identities will melt and will become one identity. Framers of Indian Constitution rejects melting pot theory. They believe in the salad bowl theory, where your distinctive identities will be celebrated and will be preserved. And therefore, Indian model, in my opinion, probably is a superior model. There was a discussion about religion. I am reminded of Hans Kung's famous statement. Of course, I would agree with Sam that religions have really brought a lot of bloodshed in this world. But Hans Kung said, there shall not be lasting peace in this world unless there is peace between and within religions. As you know, Muslims are fighting Muslims, so you need to have peace within religions as well. Chief Justice Lethman of Australian High Court said, the success of a democracy depends on the amount of protection which is enjoyed by the minority, as majority can take care of its interest on its own. Now, a country which was divided in the name of religion, and we were framing our constitution, so when the question of the minority rights came in, when Mahavir Tyagi, he said, let us wait, let us see what rights Pakistan is giving to its minorities. And then Nehru and others in the Constituent Assembly said, the issue of minority rights of Indian minorities have nothing to do with Pakistan. Whatever Pakistan may do with its minorities, we are not concerned. And if you look at the kind of minority protection Indian Constitution gives, is way ahead of several other constitutions. So we do not believe in our system in what many people say justice for all, because justice is a very difficult term to understand. Indian Constitution does not believe in the formal equality. So unlikes are not to be treated alike. Likes are to be treated alike. Indian Constitution believes in substantive equality. In substantive equality, the differences are to be recognized. And the differential treatment is to be made. Now, just to give you an example, that the Constitution says any section of Indian citizens having a distinct language, script or culture of its own shall have right to conserve the same. So if you have a distinct language or a script or a culture, you have a constitutional right, and this right has not been subjected to any restriction. So it is a kind of an absolute right. And then minorities have been given rights to set up their educational institutions and educational institutions of their choice. And Supreme Court said their choice means their choice, so it is within the power of the minorities to expand their choice as much as they want. We don't have one national language. Hindi is only our official language. You have number of languages, 18, 19 languages. We also made a provision within the Constitution about the representation of Anglo-Indian communities. We took care of SCs and STs and OBCs and women. And therefore, the idea was that we will have pluralism. Somebody was talking about difference between pluralism and secularism. I am tempted to say that Nehru answered this question by saying that our secularism will not have Jefferson's wall of separation, even though in reality you never see wall of separation. Even on your dollar you are saying we trust in God. And if you go to Jefferson's memorial, you will see initial few lines are all about religions, that the liberty comes from religion. So religion will always be there. We like it or we don't like it, because men are incredibly, religious. In the Constituent Assembly, Sam mentioned about religion being private. I entirely agree with him. Naziruddin Ahmad made two suggestions. One was that in Article 25 we should add word privately, that everyone shall have a freedom of religion to profess and practice religion privately. But somehow it was not agreed to. The other suggestion from Naziruddin was we should all have Chinese names so that our religious identity should not become visible. That was also not accepted. So I feel personally that, and therefore our secularism. And there cannot be Indian secularism if you just want that religion is different and state is different. I'm also tempted to share with you that there is a rise in religiosity. If you look at all tours, some 68% of tours are religious pilgrimages. This increased religiosity, unfortunately, is devoid of spirituality. What Sam was talking about, you may be a Hindu or Muslim, it doesn't really matter if you have a spirituality. So we are increasingly becoming ritualistic, and we are increasingly becoming religious, but we have no spirituality, and that's why we don't really respect fellow human beings. I will end with one more response to Sam about the structure of word should change. Yes, it should. If you look at League of Nations, it talked about minority rights. You got your First World War and Second World War on the question of minority rights. The minority rights conversation and discourse did not really help, because you got a Second World War, and under Nazi Germany, Jews as a minority were discriminated. You had a Holocaust. And therefore the word again changed on the question of discourse on rights, and when we got Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there is no mention of minority right, because we thought minority rights were not enough to protect Jews, and therefore we talked of individual rights. So UDHR is talking of rights of individuals, and then subsequently ICPR will also talk of rights of individuals. And it was around 1982 or so, we got another convention on the rights of ethnic and religious minorities, and latest realization is that individual rights are not enough. Indian Constitution accepts this thesis that mere right to equality is not enough, that if everybody is treated equally, that is right, that is not fine. Therefore, after individual, this is a negative term, but Chinnappa Reddy in the national anthem case, where you had some followers of Jehovah Witness sect, 3 children who did not sing the national anthem in a school in Kerala, even though they respectfully stood and their eyes were shut and heads were down, but they did not sing because their religion prohibited singing. High Court said, well, there is nothing in the national anthem Jan Gan Man against Jesus, but that was never their argument. When they came to the Supreme Court found a way to help them and accommodate them. And Supreme Court said that every right will have a positive connotation, it will have a negative connotation, so you have a right to speak, it would include right to silence. And these people, when the national anthem was being sung, they did not obstruct it, they were merely exercising their right to silence. And the last line of Justice Chinnappa Reddy's judgment is, our traditions teach us tolerance. And this tolerance, in my opinion, means acceptance. You accept me the way I am, rather than expecting me to change to your way. Our traditions teach us tolerance. Our Constitution preaches tolerance. Let us not dilute it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mustafa. At this time, I would like to invite Mr. Ajit Sahi for a few brief remarks. Those of you who do not know Mr. Sahi, he's an investigative reporter turned human rights defender from India. He's currently works advocacy director with work in India, has focused on exposing the religious minorities, especially at the hands of the law enforcement agencies. In DC, he works on the campaigning on Capitol Hill and the US government to bring attention to the status of human rights, civil liberties, and religious freedom in India. Mr. Sai?
I can't even take refuge in, as Salman Saab said, in saying that at least half of you know what I'm about to say because nobody knows me. So you can't. And thank you for this opportunity. I did not expect to be speaking here. My respect and regards to all of you here. I'm a strange entity. I am basically a career journalist from India. I have worked in different publications and television news stations in India. But about 10 years ago, I became an investigative reporter with a magazine, news magazine. Some of you may know about it. It's named Tehelka. And I just, I was actually very surprised. And I was a little intrigued because every time there was a bomb blast in India, of which there were many about 10 years ago, within seconds, if not within seconds, then certainly within minutes, the television news stations in India would start saying, "Iske taar Simi se jude hue hain." Some invisible wire connected Simi, and Simi stood for Students' Islamic Movement of India. And having been a reporter myself, I was quite surprised how quickly everybody could know who was behind those bomb blasts. And so I traveled across India, and to cut a long story short, I found through my investigation that about tens of hundreds of Muslims who had been arrested on charges of national security and terrorism, some of the most stringent laws in India, were actually framed in those cases. And it wasn't my finding. My finding was not the finding that they were innocent. My finding was that courts across India were throwing out such cases and calling them fabricated. Not only were the courts, it was not a case of insufficient evidence or lack of evidence. It was actually the courts were saying that these cases were fabricated and they were calling out the police against it. Very few of you would perhaps remember that on 16th of May 2014, the day the BJP won the historic election of 2014 and Mr. Modi became, or rather it was certain that he will be made Prime Minister of India. On that very day, as results were coming in, about 11:30 in the morning, the Supreme Court of India was ruling upon, in a case of terrorism, which was called the Akshardham case from Gujarat, in which in September 2002, a couple of terrorists came in and they shot dead about 3 dozen people before they were killed themselves. They were arrested, Muslims, all of them, of course, from Ahmedabad. And they were convicted by the trial court in Gujarat. They were convicted by the High Court of Gujarat at the same time that the results were coming in 2014. On 16th of May, the Supreme Court ruled and gave a judgment. At the same time, it gave a judgment saying it acquitted every one of them. One of them, several of them had been in prison for years. One of them had been in prison for 11 years without bail. And the Supreme Court said the conviction of these 8 people was a travesty of their human rights. These words, this sentence, I quote verbatim from the judgment. The Supreme Court said, and it said, it is something like unbelievable, not of course using the word unbelievable, but it said it is inexplicable that the Gujarat Home Department did not apply its mind before sanctioning the prosecution of these Muslims. And who was the Gujarat Home Department? In all his life as Chief Minister of Gujarat, Mr. Modi did not appoint anybody as the full-time Home Minister of Gujarat. He was himself the Home Minister for Gujarat. Everybody else was his Minister of State. Anyhow, just to share with you what we are trying to do here in Washington, D.C., I've been walking the corridors of Capitol Hill. What we are trying to set up, Salman Saab spoke about how the majority and the minority needs to come together. You will be happy to know we are putting together a coalition. A coalition of sorts has always worked in Capitol Hill, but now that I'm working 24/7 there, what we are doing is that we are going around the place. And typically, I introduce myself as saying, my name is so-and-so, I work with this organization. I am a Hindu, this organization is all Muslim organization. How about interfaith? It doesn't get better than this. And therefore, the point that I'm trying to convey to everybody on Capitol Hill is very simple. That look, this is not about a question, this is not a question of Muslims. This is not a question of Christians. This is not a question of Dalits. This is a question about the very idea of India. This is a question about the very soul of India. And thank God for the fact that we had Mahatma Gandhi in this country until about 70 years ago. We don't have to discover something new. We just have to go back what we learned during the freedom struggle. There are two stakeholders we have here in the United States. And this is where all of you have a great role to play. The one stakeholder is Capitol Hill. I was speaking with friends here on the table that I've been sitting on, and they were quite surprised to hear some of the things I shared with them, my experience and my understanding of things, how they're functioning on Capitol Hill. We all believe that the Democratic Party is the beacon of progressive values and multiculturalism. But what I discovered on Capitol Hill is actually the Republicans are far more open to hear about issues of human rights, civil liberties, and religious freedom in India than the Democrats are. And I'm not talking about Democrats and Republicans in the rest of the country in the United States, but I'm talking about people on Capitol Hill. Because the Republicans have an evangelical Christian base and they are very strong on issues of religious freedom. They understand the issues of religious freedom. Secondly, the Department of State. We have a very strong presence. Mr. Salman Khurshid has spoken very nicely. He's also spoken like a politician, which is what he is, apart from being one of the renowned and best-known jurists in India. So therefore, he has always said the other idea, but we are really talking about the Sanghi idea of India. We are really talking about how the so-called Hindutva politics, the Hindutva ideology is trying to drain out, is trying to convert India into some kind of a monolithic and a single approach. It doesn't consider itself, it sees no value in India being multicultural and multi-ethnic and a secular entity. And what we have on Capitol Hill is a very strong presence of that ideology. They have been working there for years, let me tell you. They have been very, very strong there. I went to meet with a Department of State official 3 days ago. And she said, up until now, there has been only one voice on Capitol Hill in Foggy Bottom here. And that's the only voice that people know about. I went up and I spoke to, another official a member of Congress actually, and his staff. And I said, how many political parties do you think there are in India? He said, I don't know. I said, take a guess, 1, 5, 10, 20, 500,000 million. He said, I don't know, 20. I said, there are probably 500 registered parties across India. And how many of them do you think are Muslim political parties? She said, I don't know, 20. I said, 0. You will not find a single political party that says, we are a Muslim political party and we are here only for the Muslims. And how many Muslims do you think are running those political, the rest of the political, how many Hindus do you think have a political party? She said, BJP. I said, well, every single political party in India is run by Hindus. So this distinction makes no sense. I said, for every Hindu American you show me who is a supporter of Modi, I will probably bring you 3 Hindu Americans who are not supporters of Modi and who are not supporters of the BJP. And I testified, there is a Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission of the US Congress. They had, this is a commission of the US Congress. And they invited me to testify before them. I testified before them 2.5 years ago, in June 2016. And Congressman Joe Pitts, he was from Pennsylvania, I think, he's since retired. Randy Hultgren is his replacement, who's now contesting this election from 14th District, adjacent to Chicago. And Congressman Joe Pitts, of the Republican co-chair, and Congressman Jim McGovern, the Democrat co-chair, who continues to be the Democratic co-chair. And if the House flips, he might become the main co-chair in the commission. And when they were talking to me, one of my colleagues who was testifying before me, John Sifton, from Human Rights Watch, he said the BJP is the main actor in this violence against minorities. And I said I would like to make a correction to that. The BJP is not just the main actor, it is the producer and the director of such violence against minorities. But we need to understand, and this is why my hope from all of you is, and this is what I wanted to make my brief point is, that please, as Salman Saab rightly said, this is not about Hindus or this is not about Muslims. We need to come together. Because if we do not protect the idea of India as we have understood it, we will not be a liberal place anymore. And if it stops being a liberal place for Muslims, pretty soon it will stop being a liberal place for Hindus also. And within Hindus, it will stop being a liberal place for this kind of Hindu first and that kind of Hindu. And ultimately, we don't know where we will be. We will probably all be living in Swat Valley. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Sai, for those remarks. I would like to remind everybody to please put down their questions on the paper, and Salman, if you could please go around and collect them. I would like to now call on Samir Khaja to very briefly tell us about ISPI. Samir, if you can. Once Samir is done, we will have Mr. Rashid Ahmad come and take question answers. And if you are quick with your questions, I'm sure the answers will be quick as well, and then we can all move on to dinner. So here is Samir Khaja.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again. A little bit about ISPI. I know there are lots of questions going around, which is this organization that is able to bring in such esteemed guests and the distinguished audience here. So I thought I'll fill in that role and answer those questions. ISPI is an organization that was started way back in the mid-90s, in fact 1994. I think that angle was better. In 1994, under the auspices of Dr. Javed Akhtar, and since then they have done some tremendous amount of work. Can't hear you? Can't hear me? Okay, let's try this. Hopefully this is going to work. So in 1994, ISPI was started under the auspices of Dr. Javed Akhtar, and since then they have done some tremendous amount of work publishing multiple policy papers and policy documents which was used all over US, including Washington and certain other policy makers. Along with that, they worked with many organizations outside and engaged with Chicago Council of Global Affairs on many initiatives that brought to light various issues related to the community.
You can take it. Right.
You know, if it's not working, you can shut it off.
Okay,
I think I'm fine.
You
Yeah.
shut it off
Okay.
from there.
All right.
Switch on.
We can hear without
Okay.
just by yourself.
Okay, let me try this again. All right, so since 1994, like I just said, multiple policy papers, multiple esteemed organizations, they engaged with a lot of organizations in order to further the causes. And next year is going to be the 25th year of ISPI. We don't hear about them much to actually getting things done. And I think that's a lot of credit to them. So fast forward to current, make pluralism and progress. As we may have noticed, those who were here earlier also before this event, that's the common thread running through everybody's mind here. Peace, that includes self-preservation, security, freedom from fear, being able to live in a society where every third thought is not about what's going to happen to me tomorrow. So vision of peace, vision of pluralism, inclusiveness, a vision of progress at the individual level, at the community level, at the global level. If this sounds too much for what ISPI is going to attempt to do now again, that reminds me of a song. You may say I'm a dreamer. Anybody?
But I'm not the only one.
But I'm not the only one. Wow. Thank you, Dr. Khurshid. Yes, you may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. So that's today. And the call for action is for like-minded people to participate in helping build this ecosystem, this platform where we can all engage within ourselves and outside of ourselves. I think it was Dr. Alexander this afternoon who said, there are two types of engagement. One is within ourselves and within outside of ourselves. And that happened to be one of the driving values of ISPI. So if you're interested in participating in this journey, 25th anniversary coming up next year, please, we'd love to have a conversation with you, either Dr. Javed Akhtar or Rashid Ahmed or myself. My name is Samir Khaja. We'd love to have a dialogue with you. If you share the values, please let us talk.
Thank you, Samir, for letting us know about ISPI. I know everybody's waiting for dinner, so I'd like to keep this extremely brief. Yes, I heard those claps. So, to end, I would like to quote Mirza Ghalib. After listening to everyone, I think there was a lot of very intense and heavy talk and discussion. So I think this prose by Mirza Ghalib really sums it up very well. बस के दुश्वार है हर काम का आसान होना, आदमी को भी मुयस्सर नहीं इंसान होना. So not every task is easy to accomplish. After all, it is even difficult for man to be human. With that, I would like to invite Mr. Rashid Ahmed to start to moderate the question and answer session. If you've all given your questions, then Mr. Rashid Ahmed, who is originally from India and was initially in the corporate world and is currently the executive director of Center on Muslim Philanthropy, and in the past has held titles such as the executive director of Islamic Medical Association of North America and the founder of Indian American Muslim Council. So he is very well versed with this kind of format, and hopefully he will expedite the question and answers and not keep all of us away from the food. With that, Mr. Rashid Ahmed, please go. Thank you again for...
Thank you, Zainab. One of the founders, not just the founder. Salman Khurshid, what is this Babar ki aulad? Could you please explain?
Babar Ki Aulad is just a play that I wrote 6 years ago. It's about people being accused of being aliens, foreigners. It's a pejorative term, Babar Ki Aulad. I thought I would turn it into something positive, and it's a play about the discovery of a young historian, young history student who wants to discover the reason why people are accused or abused of being Babar Ki Aulad. So he goes through a process, imaginary process of a conversation with Bahadur Shah Zafar, who in turn tells him, why are you asking this? Because I am Babar Ki Aulad as well. And he says, no, but you are different. You are a symbol of patriotic zeal, you are a symbol of fight for independence and so on. And Bahadur Shah Zafar then explains through showing each of the kings of the Mughal dynasty as to how the identity of a modern Indian has been shaped and how that identity then emerged as the battle against the British for freedom. And therefore in the end he says to Bahadur Shah Zafar, now that we are independent, why don't we take you back to India and in Rangoon? And Bahadur Shah says, I would be happy to come. But where is the place for a king in a democracy? And this boy says, no, but you're no ordinary king. You are an emperor who has the endorsement and support of the people of India. So come back. And he then wistfully says, Bahadur Shah, I would come back, but if I do come back, it'll kill my poetry, because my poetry's pain would disappear. How will then I be able to say, Lagta nahi hai ji mera ajre nayar mein, kiski bani hai alame na paedar mein, कह दो इन हसरतों से कहीं और जा बसे, इतनी जगह कहाँ है दिले दागदार में. So and that's where the play ends. So it's actually a dramatic way of saying all the things that we are trying to say tonight. I hope you have a chance to see it sometime. Tom Alter used to perform that role, but he passed away last year. Now the gentleman who is the director, Saeed Alam, has stepped into his shoes, and he does a really remarkable job. So if you can't get to see it, please see it on YouTube. It's there. Thank you.
So you're saying you won't bring it to Chicago?
I didn't say that. I wasn't seeking invitations, but if there is an invitation, it will be very difficult to say no.
I have a lot of questions. Some of them are comments, which probably would be addressed in the answers itself, so I'll skip that. This is to Mr. Sam Pitroda. Why does Mr. Sam Pitroda feel the current climate of intolerance initiated in India? Exclusions within society have been in existence all over the world since much earlier.
Partly because we have found this new tool called social media. And on social media, lies get amplified. It's a new tool we don't know how to use, so it's a little toy that kids have gotten and they are just fiddling with it. Hopefully in 5-7 years, it'll get settled down and people would really understand the true meaning of social media. Until then, they'll misuse it and we got to suffer.
What is the core reason that last 20 years extremism, racism on the rise in the world? Is it a cyclical issue in humanity? Is it economics when technology has increased connectivity?
This is for anybody, but I guess connectivity.
Connectivity is also.
To take new tools to do the same thing we have been used to doing it in the past. We wind up using all this technology to improve little productivity, efficiency, but do the same thing. We haven't yet figured out what to do with this new tool. That has not been done today. It's a complicated issue, and I raised this many times in my professional capacity at many forums, saying it is one thing to use digital technology to do the same thing we have been doing. Take an example of education. Why should I take 4 years to get a degree? Who came up with this idea that it should always take 4 years? It takes 4 years in India, in Japan, in US, in Brazil, in China. Why? Because as soon as we think of education, we assume duster, blackboard, chalk, teacher, classroom, textbook, exam, certificate, grades. None of these things make sense anymore. Teachers have no role to play according to me. And when I say this, teachers all react. Of course they are supposed to react. I don't need teacher to teach me anything. All I need is 3 things: motivation, time, and content. I need teacher to be a mentor, but none of the teachers are trained to be mentor. This is the kind of dilemma we have. If I was to build a university of tomorrow, it will not look like Harvard or MIT or Stanford. Why would I pay $200,000 to get an MBA? It doesn't make sense anymore. But we still do it. Because that's what we have created as the sort of system. And this system is going to fall apart. Today in India we have 32 million court cases. He knows that. 32 million court cases pending. Sometimes it takes 10 years to get justice. We know we have all the tools. You can finish all court cases in less than 18 months, plus or minus, 20%. All technology is available. Who wants to do it? And I can give you examples after examples like this. But the mindset is still not there to do things differently. And that's what we are being challenged today. Everybody wants to go back. My religion, my culture, my music, my this. It's not yours, it's everybody's. And that's the challenge.
This is to Salman Khurshid Sahab. If Muslim institutions can agree on one project to work together, what project would you suggest?
Well, I assume this is.
I was going to say, vote Congress.
I can't, frankly, I can't improve upon that. But there may be a conflict of interest because I intend to contest the next election as well. So there may be a conflict of interest that I'm campaigning here. But no, but I think one important thing that we have to strive for is excellence. Just because you're a Muslim institution, you don't necessarily have to be less than anybody else. And I think that pursuit of excellence is something that is that's important, that's imperative, and that's one answer to many of our problems. And pursuit of excellence, if you're really interested in knowing how to go about it, read the Knowledge Commission's report and you'll have it all. And that's Knowledge Commission report, as you know, was authored by the gentleman who's sitting next to me.
Now that you announced that you're running next election, what is Rahul Gandhi and Congress doing about lynching? Are you comfortable saying Vande Mataram and Bharat Mata Ki Jai?
Let me just tell you clearly that there is no issue about Vande Mataram. There is no issue about Bharat Mata Ki Jai, except that what we do is, what we believe is that it hasn't to be restricted to only one expression of our determination and our affiliation to our nation. We are equally involved in saying, लब पे आती है दुआ बन के तमन्ना मेरी, जिंदगी शम्मा की सूरत हो खुदा तेरी. We are equally involved in saying that that there is no ultimate difference between Ram Raj and Nizam-e-Mustafa. It's only a matter of understanding what we are getting at. I have a deep faith and belief that if Ram Raj is true Ram Raj, it is for the poor. It is for compassion, it is to help each other, it is to bond. And Nizam-e-Mustafa is the same. I often tell people that in India, if you ask a Hindu, where can you find Swarg upon this earth? The Hindu normally says, अपनी माँ के चरणों की धूल सर पे अपने माथे पर लगा लो, स्वर्ग मिल जाएगा. Then you go to a Muslim household and you say, जन्नत कहाँ मिलेगी इस दुनिया में? और वो कहते हैं कि माँ के पाँव में जन्नत है. माँ के तलवे के नीचे जन्नत है. Now, in such a beautiful country, in such a beautiful ethos, if people can find the difference between a Hindu mother and a Muslim mother, I think it's a great tragedy. Let us reaffirm our faith in our understanding of Indian culture, Indian ethos, and of what the idea of India is. And we are all going to prosper, we are all going to be safe, we are all going to be happy. Let's work for that happiness.
How can we bring back pluralism that Gandhi, Patel and Azad practiced?
Vice Chancellor should answer that.
No, we have to first of all express our faith in Gandhiji rather than he be just symbol of some Swachh Bharat do we really believe in his ideology of pluralism? I think lately, at least in the public discourse, any talk about pluralism will be condemned. That should not happen. This whole difference that when you talk of rights of minorities, it is appeasement, that's wrong. So we need to tell people that all citizens of the country must develop if country has to develop. So no country can really progress if a significant number of its minorities lag behind. I believe in the constitution now we have a fundamental duty that we will cherish and uphold the ideals of our freedom struggle. Now those ideals of freedom struggle will take us back to Gandhi, Patel and Azad.
This question is to Dr. Javed Akhtar. If you could, how would you design or groom a youth think tank today which will have a real meaningful impact tomorrow?
I don't know the answer to that. That's why I need people to join so that we can brainstorm. We need thought leaders. We need brain trust to come up with practical ways of having an impact.
You haven't clapped? What is this? You haven't That's the most honest answer you can clap.
We're working on it.
What suggestions are in the bracket practical do you have to return back the trend towards pluralism, authoritarianism, prejudice in public life?
We don't want to return to authoritarianism.
What is your honest opinion of near future of India and in the context of pluralism? Anybody can.
Yes.
Good thing to have.
That was a question about an opinion and you got it. What tactical suggestions, recommendations does Mr. Khurshid have to address this gap in pluralism? I think it's...
Well, I think frankly, demand and aspiration for pluralism must also persuade you that it's as much pluralism for you as it is for the other person. So I think what we need to do is to apply rules for ourselves, and the same rules must apply to others. It's a matter of give and take. It's not just a matter of take and take. I think if we see it in that manner, we will be fine.
Different mics give pluralism.
Let me give you an example. Once in Delhi, in a big press conference, 50 cameras and all this standard Indian crowd, somebody asked me, says, what's your opinion on corruption? And people ask all kinds of questions. And I said, look, I don't have an opinion on corruption. But only thing I can tell you is I'm not corrupt. Guaranteed 100%. But I cannot say the same thing about my wife. I think pluralism is in that category. You have to believe. You have to act. Don't expect somebody else. That's their problem. Try to convince them. But if you genuinely believe in it, it comes out loud and clear. If you are fake, I have a conversation on it. If enough of us believed in it, if I can go to Dalit's place and eat with him, if I can go to my Muslim friend's house and enjoy as if they are my family, it's done. I don't need big lecture and conference and debate. but enough of us need to do that. I think that's the key.
What help will you, in this case I believe party, they're referring to Congress party officials, can you need or do you need from here or regional?
As the chairman of the Indian Overseas Congress, it is my responsibility to put in a couple of sentences. We need active groups in Chicago. We have lots of active teams in New York, Washington, in some other cities. We don't have that vibrant Indian overseas community for Congress here. So we would like you to come forward, help us, increase members, begin conversation, participate in elections. You know, in Karnataka election last time, about 20 people from NRI community in US went back and campaigned, helped, and it makes a difference. In Punjab, they had 5 vans by Indian Overseas Congress people campaigning, full vans. So it's one thing to criticize, argue, discuss, another thing to really devote some time and energy and go do something. Not that this is good and that is bad, but it's an option for you. So I encourage you to be more active, speak up, and join in this process. Thank you.
The Master of Ceremonies has given me just one more question permission. You know, they are to control the stage, so I will just abide by it. This is to Professor Faizan Mustafa. You correctly stated the good points of Indian Constitution protecting identity of minorities. Question: how to protect this provision against a majority changing constitution, quotes and quotes, to become dictatorship of 51%?
No, majority cannot change the constitution, because we discussed in the afternoon session also that the protection of rights of minorities is part of the basic structure. So no government can really will be able to change it. But I would rather go a step ahead and say that if India is secular today or plural today, it is not because minorities have made it plural. The commitment to preserve secularism and preserve our pluralism came from the majority community. Most of the Hindus are tolerant. Most of the Hindus are not fascist and not majoritarian. So I think that we are again at that crossroad where the majority community has to decide what kind of India they want in future. And I have a great faith in their commitment to pluralism. And they will eventually vote and decide in favor of pluralism. Yeah, please.
Thank you again to our panel, and thank you, Mr. Rashid Ahmed, for moderating. I'd like to keep my thank you remarks very brief. Thank you very much for coming. Food is now ready.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for doing a great job. Thank you.
Can you announce that for vegetarian guests, you have vegetarian food on the right side of your right?
One quick announcement for our vegetarian guests. There's vegetarian food towards the right. This side, my right. Vegetarian food is towards my right. That way.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.